Hey there, how's it going? This is Bonnie Violet. I am a trans, femme, genderqueer, spiritual drag artist and digital chaplain. And in case you don't know where you are, you have found yourself on the Drag and Spirituality podcast and in our special series dedicated to our time at the Drag and Spirituality Summit that took place in Chicago in October of 2022. The next few episodes will be panel discussions that we had with drag artists from across the United States, Canada, and beyond. And we just wanted to share the audio with folks who are interested in drag and spirituality. So stay tuned and listen up and bear with the sound. My hope is that we'll work on it being great, but you know how that goes sometimes. So we did our best to try to capture some sound for our first ever Drag and Spirituality Summit in the hopes of being able to upload it here on a podcast for folks who couldn't be there in person. Thank you and enjoy.
Thanks. My name is King Lotus Goy. I use the pronouns he, him, z, zir, and they, them. I'm a transgender, non-binary, unapologetically disabled, and chronically illustrious Chinese American drag king, youth educator, and anti-disciplinary artist. I came here from unceded Lishan Ohlone land, also known as Oakland, California. It's important to be clear here that no matter where you're living in the so-called United States, you are living on stolen native land. Chicago is the traditional homeland of the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi nations. Other tribes such as the Miami, Ho-Chunk, Fox, Illinois, and Kaskaskia nations also call this area home. As a guest on this land, I recognize that I benefit from settler colonialism, which has afforded my ancestors and me privileges to travel, perform, and speak across the nation, amongst many other things. I pay the utmost respect to the Indigenous elders, past, present, and future, who have stewarded this land throughout generations and continue to do so. And I know that paying respects doesn't pay the bills or give people their basic needs. So let's not stop at acknowledgement, though it is a great place to start. Yesterday, I made a donation to the American Indian Center of Chicago, which is the first urban Indian center in the country. AIC focuses on the arts by offering youth education programming, cultural workshops like drum making and moccasin making, and by housing the first and only art gallery space dedicated to the promotion and education of Native artists in the city of Chicago. In all facets of my artistic and educational practice, I strive to act in solidarity with Black, Indigenous, people of color, because I recognize that disability justice, Indigenous sovereignty, and liberation from racial capitalism and all systems of oppression are inextricable. In other words, caring for Indigenous futures means caring for all of our futures. If you agree, I encourage you to make your own donation at www.aicchicago.org. If you're tuning into the live stream, hi, you can look into the tribes whose ancestral land you occupy. A gentle reminder of one of my favorite phrases to remind my students, Google is free. And you can give regular monetary donations, have your company or church give regular donations, or offer your time to any volunteer opportunities available. Because we're all interconnected. In the words of queer ancestor Audre Lorde, there is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. And boy, does my life have many issues. But this isn't a queer first date, so I won't be trauma dumping on stage yet. Thank you. Let me back up a little bit. I was raised by a Chinese Lutheran Christian mother who went to church nearly every single weekend without fail. Although these days my mom likes to tune into the live stream sometimes, and who can blame her? She instilled me in a young age that church is not just something you go to because you have to. It's something you go to because you want to. And you also go because it would be a sin not to go. And when I was a kid, I loved going to church. I loved Sunday school, youth group, all of it. I was in the church's annual nativity story play. I was the drama leader for vacation Bible study, where I always volunteered to play the male characters for some reason. They never let me. Until one day, someone was sick, and they had to because there were not enough young boys. And, all these conservatives out here demonizing queer and trans people, storming our drag story hours. I want to let y'all know, the Christian church was the very first place I did drag. Y'all should have seen me as David in the story of David and Goliath. When you defeat a giant, just imagine that death drop. Okay, that was really corny, but as a kid, I was fascinated by these stories. Stories of angels, Jesus' miracles, his resurrection, and I really wanted to believe them. I thought I believed them. But the more I grew up, the more I started to realize that not all those good old Christian values, or at least some people's interpretation of them, applied to me. For example, we all know a conservative favorite, that marriage should be between the two and only two genders, man and woman. As someone who is neither a man or a woman, I guess I just can't ever get married, right? Just kidding, I don't believe in marriage. But I am polyamorous, which is even more blasphemous than being trans, depending on who you ask. Anyways, when I was 13, I came to the distinct realization that I wasn't feeling the faith and the Holy Spirit in the ways that I was told that I should. The ways that I saw the people around me feeling it. I looked at my pastor, my congregation, the musicians, all sharing their stories of how they'd seen an angel or how they speak to God every day and God speaks to them. But when I prayed, when I talked to God, I heard nothing. When I sang the hymns at church, I felt nothing. I desperately wanted to feel something. I wanted to believe. I also didn't want to go to hell, and I knew that lying was a sin, and I felt like I was lying. I felt like an imposter. And that made me sad because I genuinely enjoyed the friends and the community, a sense of belonging that I got at church. And as queer and trans people especially, don't we all just want to belong in some way? Don't we all just want to feel like we're a part of something? Something bigger than ourselves? Spoiler alert, you don't need church or religion to do this. But I felt like a poser, and that also made me upset. I was 13, so a lot of angst. I felt confused and angry at the Christian God for not answering my prayers, for not giving me this experience of the Holy Spirit. So at 13, I followed in the footsteps of my rebellious older sister, who at the time had recently proclaimed atheism, and I stopped going to church. I denounced Christianity, and I didn't return to any form of faith or spirituality for many years. In retrospect, I realized that I was trying so hard to perform this role of the good Christian Chinese daughter, which felt wrong for more than one reason. For one, I never truly felt like a daughter or a girl. Until my teenage years, I was always a huge tomboy. I threw tantrums when I was forced to wear a dress or brush my hair. I hated the color pink, and flowers, and everything else that cis heteronormative society tells us is traditionally feminine. Now I realize that was just a bunch of internalized misogyny, but that's for a different speech. So anyways, I didn't know there was anything wrong with my body, my gender expression, until someone else told me that it was wrong. I was told so many times that I internalized it. And in high school and throughout the first few years of college, I buried all the masculine and weird and wrong parts of myself. For years, I performed femininity, whatever that is, performed the role of being a good Chinese daughter. And what I mean by this is I did a lot of things according to this internal belief that was instilled in me culturally, like you have to follow all the rules. You have to respect elders and authority, but not cops, never cops, and working extremely hard in school and in college. I worked so hard, in fact, that I burned out fast. Part of this burnout had to do with internalized ableism because I was suppressing painful, debilitating symptoms of a chronic illness that I've had since I was a kid, and also the physical and emotional manifestations of intergenerational trauma and multiple sexual assaults. But I was never encouraged or taught how to talk about my pain or my feelings. I was taught to not complain, suck it up, and work harder. So I did. I did this until January 2017. At age 22, I experienced a violent physical assault that changed my life. I won't get into every single detail because it's not all my story to tell, but what I can tell you is a close friend of mine had an unexpected mental health crisis, which resulted in them taking the life of an innocent stranger. And at the time, I had little knowledge about how to support someone who's having a mental health crisis. In the process of trying to help them myself, they attempted to kill me too. I was held hostage and stabbed numerous times in my face, neck, head, hands, back, and shoulders. It all happened so quickly that I barely had time to realize what was happening. All I remember was just focusing all my energy on trying to fight back, to yell at them to stop. It got to the point where I almost escaped. I had my hand on the door, but they had my hair in one hand and the knife in the other. They commanded me to let go of the door. I wouldn't. Then they told me that if I didn't let go of the door on the count of 3, they were going to do what I didn't want them to do. They were going to kill me. They started counting, and in that moment, I realized that they would likely kill me either way. And suddenly I had this eerie sense of peace and calm come over me. So I accepted that. Right before they reached 3, I let go of the door, very much expecting to die. Instead, they let go of my hair and put down the knife. To this day, I don't know what compelled them to do that. And I still don't believe in higher powers. But I do believe that it was a sign. That my survival is a sign that I am meant to be here. After that incident, I was at my lowest. I was forced to testify in the trial, which was re-traumatizing. As re-traumatizing as it was to see my friend plead not guilty by reason of insanity, and then be sentenced to life in a psychiatric prison. As an abolitionist, this pains me deeply. It pains me that we live in a society that doesn't invest in mental health resources, especially for the most marginalized, which would have inevitably decreased the likelihood of acts of violence like this happening. But after that experience, I didn't have the resources myself. I did what I knew how to do, which was to keep pushing. I went back to college just weeks after I got out of the hospital because I wanted to just move on. I wanted to distract myself from the pain. I didn't want to deal with it. But beyond, the physical pain of my healing injuries, it was more the emotional and spiritual pain. Although I don't blame them at all to this day for their mental illness, I don't blame them for what they even did to me. The pain of having my trust betrayed by a close friend was still very raw. The pain of never being able to know closure. The pain of survivor's guilt. I couldn't talk to any of my close friends or even strangers about it because I didn't know anyone who had experienced anything like this. The depression, anxiety, PTSD, and chronic pain eventually became unbearable and was impacting my school, work, social life. Felt like a shell of myself. And I didn't have active suicidal ideation, but I often wished that I had been killed by my friend. Because I felt like living with this pain, living with trying to heal, wasn't worth it. And I would have rather have just died. It got to a point where physical and mental health were so bad that not being able to talk about it was truly killing me inside. And finally, I told myself I had to get help. And I did. I owe my reconnection to spirituality and therefore myself to the Bay Area Trauma Recovery Clinic and my first therapist there, shout out to Erica. Though I was very distrustful, reluctant, and unwilling at first, she was the person who helped me actually understand in an embodied way the idea of compassion and self-compassion. I'd spent the majority of my life being extremely mean and hateful towards myself. I was so desensitized to violence, both from what we see in our society and my own experiences, that I was unable to feel love and compassion and forgiveness for myself. I didn't realize how much I was blaming myself for what had happened to me until I felt the true freedom and weightlessness and limitlessness of unconditional self-love and forgiveness. Because hatred, blame, and shame are never generative or caring. But compassion gives us the comfort and encouragement to feel our feelings and have experiences without judgment. Forgiveness gives us the space to be human, to live and grow from lessons. And self-love gives us the uninhibited power to actualize our full selves and who we're destined to be. I wish that everyone gets to experience this self-love, self-forgiveness, and self-compassion. Once I started going to trauma therapy, I started to genuinely love myself more. The following year, in April 2018, I loved myself enough to finally allow myself to do drag and become King Lotus Boy. For years, I had internalized the idea that to pursue art or creative activities is to be selfish, that I had better and more useful skills to offer society and others. I knew that I'd always been creative, I'd always been a performer, but I just always had this voice in my head saying, no, you can't do that, you shouldn't do that. Then I realized that's a load of capitalist bullshit, and I'm so glad that I did. And I'm going to share a spoken word poem that I wrote that is part an ode to my trans identity, an ode to my Chinese American identity, and the origin story of King Lotus Boy. Quick show of hands, who's seen Disney's Mulan, the OG animated version? Okay, that's a majority here, so I feel good. So this is 10 things that Disney's Mulan taught me. 1. There are movies with people who look like me, who look and sound like Popo and Gong Gong, like 3 bows at ancestors' grave, with the steamy comfort of mama's rice. 2, I can't tell if I want Shang or I want to be Shang. Spoiler alert, it's both. 3, I like girls, even when they are not girls, even when they are not the girls that the world expects girls to be. 4, it's okay for girls to be strong, to win. 5, Mulan taught me that I can win. Let's get down to business to defeat the gender binary. 6, Hua Mulan, meaning magnolia flower, meaning symbol of feminine purity, dignity, yin. Kiana Lailan, meaning beautiful lotus flower, meaning symbol of purity, femininity, rebirth. The magnolia grows on trees and can live up to 100 years. The lotus rises from mud, blooms from river bottom depths. A single lotus can live for over 1,000 years. So maybe Chinese femininity is timeless. Maybe it's always been here, a lotus root hidden in the dirt, but I was always told girls aren't supposed to play in the dirt. 7, maybe I don't have to be a girl at all. Maybe all this flower and strength and honor and mud and matchmaker painted face can coexist, and still the emperor gets saved. Still, the sword of Shan Yu rests on my mantle, and I don't have to use it to sever my femininity from my masculinity to make you more comfortable. 8, let me pretend that this self-portrait is more reflection than cracked china doll. More bring honor to us all than defiance, deception, disgrace. My Gong, who died in 2018, once asked me why I haven't ever had a boyfriend after all this time. Then he asked, with hesitation, if I was a lesbian. Like Mulan, I turned my identity into disguise. If I can't answer him in his mother tongue, at least answer in a way that wouldn't dishonor the ancestors, right? 9. I don't know how to say non-binary or transgender or queer in Cantonese, meaning I don't know how to exist in any way that my family would understand. 10. Maybe this makes me more muddy lotus boy than beautiful magnolia maiden. Maybe I've spent so many years trying my hardest to sprout under the dirt of other people's expectations. Maybe my gender is a continuous regrowth. Maybe my reflection shows who I am on the inside, and maybe sometimes it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't matter, as long as I still bloom. I owe my life to drag. Drag is what gave me the courage to explore my gender, and eventually the courage and empowerment to finally assert to the world that I am transgender, non-binary, and gender fluid. To me, my relationship to my spirituality is also my relationship to my gender and my drag. You know, many of us ex-Christians were taught to think of religion in a way that felt very regimented and disconnected and obligatory. You know, I was taught that faith and spirituality were things that you could only attain if you went to church, and that church is always a physical place that you have to go to and follow certain rules and wear certain things. But now, now I know I'm not the only one who believes that drag shows too can be church. Yes. That gatherings of queer and trans and two-spirit and gender non-conforming and disabled people all existing loudly, expressively, unafraid, despite everything that has tried to kill us. Now that is divine. That is holy. I believe that all queer and trans people are holy. And drag is a special form of worship. Drag is worship of your own soul, your essence. Every time I do drag, I come closer to my truest, highest self. My spirituality today is that I don't ascribe to any organized religion or specific faith, but I try to live, think, act, and move through the world with intentions. With the intentions of being aligned with my highest truths and my highest selves. And my highest selves try to act in alignment with my values, like compassion, intersectionality, accessibility, empathy, reliability, honesty, humor, play, and mutual aid. And although I am not a Buddhist, I do resonate with some Buddhist teachings around impermanence, non-attachment, and fostering a deep sense of compassion for self and others. This compassion to me is a strength and is one of my strengths. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning with my laundry list of identifiers, I am unapologetically disabled and chronically illustrious. And I make a point to say this because most of the time, my disabilities and illnesses are invisible, meaning that you can't always look at me and tell that I'm disabled. Because we live in an ableist society that devalues and dehumanizes disabled people as lesser, our society is not designed for people like me. American society encourages the incorrect idea that you have to be old or an elder to be disabled. That you have to look sick or look disabled, whatever that means. The truth is, disability can happen at any age. You can be born with disabilities, you can develop them, you can have temporary disabilities. And I'm here to remind you that you should care about ableism and accessibility, not just because you know a disabled drag king or have a disabled friend or partner or family member, but because ableism hurts everyone. Even if you're able-bodied and you aren't personally hurt by it right now, you will be. And that's not a threat. Like it or not, unless you somehow figure out the recipe for eternal youth, you will experience disability someday. Disabilities are simply differences or changes in abilities, and they're a natural and necessary part of life, of aging. And in the words of my dear friend and fellow disability advocate, Glamputee, who is a queer, trans, biracial, glamorous amputee, they said, even if I were to wake up tomorrow and suddenly grow another leg, ableism would still exist. And I would still have to deal with the effects of that, along with so many others in my community. And I completely agree. We should all care about accessibility because when we do, it benefits everyone. And I mentioned before I'm a youth educator, so just humor me on this quick historical example here. Curb cuts, you know, the little ramp on the corner of every single street in the nation. Yeah, those were first created thanks to disabled veterans in 1945. And then in the 60s, Ed Roberts became the first disabled person who was a wheelchair user to attend UC Berkeley, my alma mater, where he soon realized just how inaccessible it was, along with the city of Berkeley as a whole. He and other disabled and non-disabled activists would actually go around the city demolishing and repaving street corners to create their own curb cuts. And they continued to rally and advocate for years and years until eventually, in 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, was passed. And now everyone enjoys curb cuts. Bicyclists, pedestrians, parents with strollers. So you see, accessibility benefits everyone, even those annoying people who ride the electric scooters. But really, I care so much about accessibility that I wrote a song about it. In February of this year, I premiered my solo musical show, Disability is a Drag, which was inspired by my experiences with anti-Asian racism, transphobia, and ableism in the San Francisco Bay Area drag scene. My song, titled Accessibility, was part of that, and I'd like to share it with you all today.
Accessibility, accessibility, it's a big necessity for me. Accessibility, accessibility, brings us closer to us all get free. If you can edit videos, you can add captions, it's the bare minimum. Yes, it may be extra work for you, but reading lips is tiresome. If you really care about deaf people, here's a secret I'll tell. It's really not that hard to find interpreters on Excel. Accessibility, accessibility, it's a big necessity for me. Accessibility, accessibility, brings us closer to us all get free. If you truly want to have inclusion and diversity, you won't complain or ignore when we demand accessibility.
I don't get what's so hard about asking if anyone has accessibility needs. The default shouldn't be to assume that people are able-bodied until proven otherwise. I think a lot of people take their abilities for granted and don't spend enough time learning about things that don't affect them personally, or so they think. The reality is, Accessibility benefits everyone, not just disabled people. The sooner you realize that, the closer we get to liberation. I'm going to teach you a few more things, but I'm not going to be nice about it anymore.
If you care about wheelchair users and the mobility impaired, please stop hosting events in venues with all these motherfucking stairs. If you care about survivors of trauma and those with photosensitivity, always give a trigger warning before you share violent flashing content widely. Accessibility, it's a big necessity for me. Accessibility, brings us closer to us all getting free. If you truly want to have inclusion and diversity, you won't complain or ignore when we demand accessibility.
This is not an exhaustive list, but I'm sure you get the gist. Accessibility is a big necessity. And don't say I didn't tell you.
Thank you, everyone. That song is not yet on any platforms because your boy does not have an agent. But if you reach out to me on social media at King Lotus Boy, that's KingLotusBoy, or email me at kinglotusboy@gmail.com. I will gladly send you the MP3 and the lyrics. Close. I want to share an affirmation, a prayer, if you will, that I wrote for myself last year. I like to return to it, especially on the days that I feel the lowest, when I feel triggered, incapable, unattractive, unconfident, because there are so many forces, so many systems of oppression, so many just assholes on the street that are pushing negativity and hatred at us every single day. So many messages from capitalism and unrealistic beauty standards that make us be so unkind to our bodies, to ourselves. And we don't need to add to that by being unkind to ourselves too. So instead, I offer gratitude to myself and my body like this. Thank you, body, for all that we have survived. Thank you, body, for holding all of my multitudes. Thank you, body, for holding me. Thank you, body, for holding me. Thank you, body, holding me. Ultimately, I don't want to be someone who can be expected. I want to be seen before I'm touched. I want to be felt before I'm perceived. And I dream of the day where we can all exist without hatred and fear. I dream of the day where we can all exist as our authentic, highest selves. And I dream of the day where we can all exist without explanation. And I want you all to want to understand. I'm not here to be understood.
Hi there, this is Bonnie Violet again. Thanks so much. We really hope you enjoyed our panel discussion or the plenary or whatever part of the Dragon Spirituality Summit you just listened to. We wanted to give a big shout out to a queer chaplain for hosting this event along with the Urban Village Church in Chicago. You can check out the links in the description to connect with each of those orgs and learn more about their work. Also, to continue to support the work of the Dragon Spirituality podcast, feel free to also check out our Patreon, where you could contribute on a monthly basis to help support the work of this podcast, along with all the productions from A Queer Chaplain. Thanks so much, and like I said, check out those links and show us some love, and let us know what you think. Like, what did you enjoy? What did you enjoy? Yeah. What would you like to hear more of? Yeah, let us know. We'd love to hear from you, and work in designing next year's Dragon Spirituality Summit 2023 to take place in San Francisco, California. Take care and be well. Bye-bye.